You don't hate your life. You hate waking up to the same alarm that pulls you out of sleep before you feel ready. You hate brushing your teeth on autopilot, barely aware of your own reflection in the mirror. You hate checking your phone before your mind even has a chance to wake up on its own. You hate the same commute, the same conversations, the same predictable version of yourself, repeating day after day. And somewhere along the way, almost without noticing it, you made a quiet but dangerous conclusion. Maybe my life just sucks. But what if that's not true? What if your life isn't the problem at all? What if it's your routine that's slowly, quietly suffocating your sense of being alive? Here's something most people never fully realize. Human beings don't actually experience life as it objectively is. We experience patterns, repetitions, and contrasts. Your brain is designed to be efficient. It constantly tries to automate everything you do so it can conserve energy and avoid unnecessary effort. That's why routines feel natural. They reduce decision fatigue. They keep you functional. But here's the part no one warns you about. The same system that keeps your life stable can also trap you inside a loop that gradually drains color, depth, and meaning out of your everyday experience. Think about this honestly. When was the last time something felt genuinely new to you? Not just slightly different, but truly new. The kind of moment where time seems to slow down, where your attention sharpens without effort, where you feel fully present instead of mentally somewhere else. For most people, those moments have become rare, and it's not because their life lacks opportunities or meaning, it's because their routine has numbed their ability to notice what's already there. Here's what's actually happening behind the scenes. When you repeat the same behaviors every day, your brain starts compressing those experiences into smaller, less detailed memories. Monday blends into Tuesday. Tuesday dissolves into Wednesday. And suddenly, an entire month feels like it disappeared, not because nothing happened, but because nothing felt different enough to be remembered. That's when thoughts begin to show up. I feel stuck in my life. I feel lost and disconnected. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. But the truth is often much simpler and less dramatic. You're not lost. You're understimulated, mentally and emotionally. Let's break this illusion in a simple way. Imagine two people living the exact same week in terms of hours. One of them travels somewhere unfamiliar, constantly encountering new places, new people, new situations. The other stays home and follows the same routine they've repeated hundreds of times before. At the end of the week, who feels like they actually lived more? Of course, the traveler. But here's what really matters. They both had the same 168 hours. The difference wasn't time. It was novelty and engagement. Your brain naturally encodes new experiences more deeply and with more emotional weight. That's why your childhood feels so long when you look back on it. Everything was new. Everything required attention. Everything felt significant. But as you grow older, your life becomes more structured, more predictable, more efficient, and slowly, more forgettable. This is where the trap quietly forms. You begin to mistake familiarity for meaninglessness. You assume, if everything feels boring, then my life must be boring. But that conclusion is misleading. It's not that your life lacks value. It's that you've stopped actively noticing it. Let's go one layer deeper. There's a psychological concept called hedonic adaptation. It describes how quickly humans get used to almost everything. Positive changes, negative changes, even major life events. That job you once worked so hard to get, now it just feels like another obligation. That apartment you were excited to move into? Now it barely registers in your awareness. Even relationships can slowly fall into this pattern, not because they have lost their meaning, but because your brain stopped treating them as something new. And when novelty disappears, emotional intensity fades with it. Life starts to feel flatter, heavier, less vivid, less alive. This is often the moment when people make drastic decisions. They quit their jobs without a clear plan. They move to a new city hoping for a reset. They end relationships believing something is fundamentally wrong, all driven by the same thought: I need a completely new life. But what they actually need is a new pattern inside the life they already have. Because here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. You can completely change your external life and still feel exactly the same inside if you carry the same routines, habits, and mental patterns into it. New city, same daily structure, new job, same way of thinking, new relationship, same emotional reactions. And eventually, the initial excitement fades again. So what's the real solution? It's not escape, it's interruption. You don't need to destroy your current life and rebuild it from zero. You need to interrupt the automatic loop that's been running unnoticed. Let's make this practical and real. Right now, your day probably follows a familiar script. Wake up, reach for your phone, go through a rushed morning routine, work through predictable tasks, scroll to disconnect, go to sleep, repeat, and your brain has optimized this sequence so efficiently that you barely need to think about it anymore. But that's exactly where the problem begins. You're no longer choosing your actions. You're executing a script. So here's the shift that actually changes things. Start introducing intentional friction into your day. Small, deliberate disruptions that force your brain to wake up again. Take a different route, even if it's slightly less convenient. Change the order of your morning routine. Eat something unfamiliar instead of defaulting to the same option. Start a conversation with someone you normally wouldn't engage with. Sit in a different place, work from a different environment. Even leaving your phone behind for an hour can feel uncomfortable enough to reset your awareness. Because novelty doesn't require a plane ticket or a dramatic life change. It requires intention and attention. And here's the deeper layer most people miss. It's not only about doing different things, it's about becoming present again while doing them. Most routines don't just automate your actions, they slowly numb your awareness. You stop noticing details, you stop questioning your surroundings, you stop engaging with the moment you're in. That's why even objectively good lives can feel empty, not because they lack meaning, but because they're being lived unconsciously. Let this sink in. A life without awareness will always feel like a life without meaning. So how do you actually change that? You train your attention like a skill. The next time you're doing something ordinary, slow it down, even slightly. Notice what's usually ignored, the texture of objects around you, the sounds in your environment, the rhythm of your own breathing, the way your body moves through space. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but it's powerful, because attention is what transforms routine into experience. Without attention, everything blends together into a blur. With attention, even the smallest moments become vivid and real. Now here's an important balance to understand. Too much chaos, and your life feels unstable and overwhelming. Too much routine, and your life feels lifeless and mechanical. The goal isn't to eliminate routine completely. It's to keep it alive and flexible. Think of your routine as a structure that supports you, not a system that controls you. Structure gives you stability, but variation gives you energy. So instead of asking yourself, how do I escape my life? Start asking a better question. How do I wake up inside the life I already have? Because chances are, your life isn't broken. You still have options, you still have time, you still have the ability to choose differently. But your routine has been running automatically for so long that it started making decisions for you. And once you recognize that, everything begins to shift. You stop waiting for a massive life-changing event. You start creating small changes on purpose. You stop blaming your entire life. You start redesigning your days. And gradually, that heavy feeling of being stuck begins to loosen its grip. Not because your life suddenly becomes perfect, but because it becomes real again. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, I hate my life, pause for a moment and ask a more precise question. What part of my daily routine is making me feel this way? Because that's where the real answer usually hides, not in a completely different life, but in a different way of experiencing the one you already have. And here's the final truth that most people overlook. You don't necessarily need more time. You don't necessarily need more money. You don't need to escape into a completely different reality. You need to feel again. And that starts with breaking the loop, even in small ways. So tomorrow, don't try to change everything at once. That's how people burn out and fall back into the same patterns. Just change one thing, one choice, one привычный крок zrobiony inakше, one small pattern that no longer runs automatically. And pay attention to what happens next. Because the moment your routine stops controlling you is the moment your life starts opening up again. And maybe, without expecting it, you'll realize something simple but powerful. You never actually hated your life. You were just asleep inside it. Wake up.